Welcome to the Jungian Anthology podcast from the C.G. Jung Institute of Chicago. Healing Cinema, Gaslight. This episode is the first in a new series called Healing Cinema. Judith Cooper, Psy.D., and Daniel Ross, PMHNP, Psychiatric Mental Health Nurse Practitioner, members of the Chicago Society of Jungian Analysts, discuss films from a Jungian point of view. These informal discussions will be released in parallel with our other episodes, lectures from our archives and interviews by Patricia Martin, and will not be on any particular schedule. In this episode, Judith and Dan discuss the 1944 film Gaslight. At some point they mention the fairy tale Fitcher's Bird, which you may or may not be familiar with, so if you want more information, there's a link to the Wikipedia page about it in the show notes. Judith Cooper, Psy.D., is a clinical psychologist and diplomate Jungian analyst in private practice in Chicago. She is a graduate and member of the C.G. Jung Institute of Chicago. She was adjunct faculty at the Illinois School of Professional Psychology, teaching projective testing. She was clinical supervisor and director of training of an APA-accredited psychology internship program at a community mental health center in Northwest Indiana. She has taught in the analyst training program and lectured on the Anima Animus and the clinical use of film. Daniel Ross, RN, PMHNP, MSN, MBA, has been a nurse for 40 years and in hospice for over 30. As a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner and Jungian analyst, he brings a medical, psychiatric, and analytical perspective to the field of end-of-life care. He first completed the 2-year clinical training program, now the JVP-JSP, at the C.G. Jung Institute of Chicago, then went on to complete the analyst training program. He is in private practice in the northwest suburbs, working with adults seeking psychotherapy, and continues to see hospice and palliative care patients at the end of life. He is co-director of the Jungian Psychotherapy Program and Jungian Studies Program at the C.G. Jung Institute of Chicago. Before we get to their discussion, I just want to share a couple more submissions from listeners. Linda from Virginia says, RN by background, master's in counseling psychology. Hung out at the Jung Institute quite often in the 90s when I lived in Chicago. Same Jungian spiritual director for 37 years, now 66, working on, quote, part 3, according to my dreams. Saw the podcast on a LinkedIn feed and looking for the next step on the path. Marcella Tobridge from Connecticut says, I began working in 2017 with a man named Thomas Pratke in Berlin, Germany, as part of the Integral Movement and Performance Practice Program, IMPP. The IMPP integrates Lecoq physical theater and neutral mask work with Jungian psychology, the teachings of Carlfred Durkheim, mythological archetype, and Zen meditation. I am a longtime theater artist with a commitment to a deeper understanding of humanity and believe in artists as cultural healers. I have specifically been looking at grief as a threshold for increased consciousness, individuation, and integration. I am more and more drawn to, quote, mature beings as practitioners and teachers. Thanks everyone for sharing. If you would like to share something about yourself, just click the link in the show notes. So now here's the discussion.
Okay, my name is Dan Ross.
I am
Judith Cooper, and we are here with the inauguration of our first podcast titled Healing Cinema. It's joining Jungian analysis with film. And this idea first came to me when I was working with Judith, who was my supervisor during my training as in the analyst training program at the C.G. Jung Institute of Chicago. And one of the things that came out of our supervision when we were talking about patients that I was working with was how we both used film to amplify certain archetypal themes, and we would both get excited about this in the course of the sessions that we had. And I always remembered that. And I think the thought for this type of thing came to me even back then, which is now several years ago. And it occurred to me more recently that we really need to do something with that. When I presented the idea to Judith, she was very interested and excited as well. Judith is a senior analyst with the Jung Institute of Chicago, and I'm a more recent graduate. I'm a neophyte in this business.
Not psychologically. You're very astute, Dan.
So Judith, why don't you tell about yourself?
I graduated the Chicago Institute in 2000 and did my thesis actually on the Animus, the construct, one of the constructs of Jung's map of the psyche, and have always been interested in film and melding my two loves, film and psychology. Actually, I've been in a film group. We're all pretty much all analysts for almost 30 years, and some of us are Jungian, and I kind of came of age in that group. And so I just love this work. And Dan and I, when we would talk, we would invariably mention what our latest film loves are. And we would just get beside ourselves with glee and excitement. And as often happens with a connection like that, it just, we build on each other's thoughts and ideas, and our insights are more than the sum of our two parts. So we're hoping that the podcast reflects some of that excitement and depth.
Good. And the film that we're going to launch this with is a film that we both love, called Gaslight. It's the 1944 version of it. The director was George Cukor. It was adapted from a play by Patrick Hamilton. There was an earlier version of the film made, and as Judith might reflect on, it lacks something that Gaslight doesn't, that Gaslight was able to achieve. It stars Charles Boyer as Gregory Anton, Ingrid Bergman as Paula, Joseph Cotton as Bryan, and Angela Lansbury in her first film, I believe, as the maid Nancy. Give a little synopsis. We're going to borrow from Wikipedia the synopsis of the story. For those of you that haven't seen it, feel free to go see it. You can actually stop this podcast, go see it, and come back to it, or you might be intrigued from this podcast to go see it and then come back to it afterwards. So the synopsis is this: after the death of her famous opera singing aunt, Paula, played by Ingrid Bergman, is sent to study in Italy to become a great opera singer as well. And while there, she falls in love with the charming Gregory Anton, played by Charles Boyer. The two return to London, and Paula begins to notice strange going-ons, missing pictures, strange footsteps in the night, and gaslights that dim without being touched. As she fights to retain her sanity, her new husband's intentions come into question.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very good synopsis.
It is, yeah. So,
where would you like to jump into? I want to leave room for the feminine, because this is a story from the perspective of the protagonist, which is Paula.
It is, and one of the things we talked about was taking the subjective view of interpretation, mm-hmm. much like Jung uses or named the two levels of interpretation for dreams, those being objective and subjective. That being that the objective level, as some of you may know, is you take every character in a dream and you look at them objectively. If you're dreaming about a boyfriend, it's really about the boyfriend's psychology in the dream. The subjective level that Jung proposed is you take every person and even inanimate objects as parts of the protagonist, the dreamer. And this subjective level of interpretation has been applied to film. So as Dan said, the film is from the point of view of Paula, the heroine in the movie and the other characters we can start thinking about as aspects of her. So that's an important piece because we're going to be talking about her animus, which is which shows up in this film in both its positive and its negative aspects. So from the opening scene, should we just dive right into it?
Yeah, let's start there.
The opening scene shows a young girl being led out of the house in London, foggy London. I don't think it's ever sunny in this picture. It's all foggy.
Yeah, right.
It has that quality of film noir.
It does.
And I think I mentioned to you, I can never remember that the director is Hitchcock. Because it feels Hitchcockian.
It does.
In its suspenseful film noir aspects. So she's being led out of the house, and an elderly gentleman says to her, she looks traumatized.
Right.
And this elderly gentleman says, you've got to put what happened behind you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a theme that we will be touching on because it's a setup. I love you use that word, the setup, the archetypal setup for things to unravel for her, to go badly, because she has put this trauma behind her.
Yes. Yeah. What occurs to you as you're saying that is how often in my analyses with patients, when it comes out, I don't remember my childhood.
Yes.
You know how often that comes about, and that's always a red flag for trauma and stuff that's going to need to unpack. And here this old man, whoever this guy is, I don't know if he's an executor of the estate or he's one of the father figures in this film, and here it is, this father figure, very patriarchal, trying to protect her in his way, telling her, don't look back.
Yes.
Don't look back.
Yes. And we know that the patients that we see that resist looking back can't move on in their lives. I mean, that's a general statement, but I think it holds.
Yeah, I think so too.
They can't move on with, because the psyche, I think we know, wants to be healed and known. So if it's holding this stuff, it just paralyzes people.
Yeah.
So analysis is negotiating that resistance with, because they also want to move forward. But
absolutely. Yeah.
So then we see Paula, I think the timeline is, it's like 10 years later, she goes off to Italy.
Yeah.
And surprise, surprise, she meets this psychopath.
Yeah. Who's just there. You know what that reminds me of? You talked about when we were talking the fairytale, Grimm's fairytale, Fisher's Bird. I went back to it, and this blows me away. So how does Paula get captured? Well, we don't know exactly, but Fisher's Bird, the capture happens when the sorcerer goes to the house of these maidens and has the basket, and he presents himself as an old man that's hungry, that needs food. So he's constellating the maternal instincts in these maidens and then it says all he has to do is touch them.
Yes.
And they come into, they jump in the it just cracks me up. It's like, wow, how does Gregory Anton show up? He's just there, he's always there, right?
Yes. Well, now having watched the film and kind of unpacked it a bit, we know he must have been stalking her, knowing that she was the niece of, well, here's spoiler alert, right? The aunt that he murdered.
Yes.
So he was stalking her, and he just appears, and of course it's funny, Dan, I remembered that my parents loved film, and so that's how I got my love of film. And I remember growing up hearing that Charles Boyer, who plays Gregory, had, quote, bedroom eyes.
Wow. Wow.
Great.
That is great.
So he seduces her.
Yeah.
He seduces her, and there's a big age difference there, I think.
Yeah. She's very young in this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And even the characters are.
Even the character.
Yeah. The age is different. So he woos her. And then as the story unfolds, I think that what's so powerful with this film is that we see she's a very self-possessed young woman.
Mm-hmm.
She's a very independent young woman. So there's a scene early on where Gregory says, "Let's get married," this detail maybe isn't important, but the music teacher says to her, "You're preoccupied. What's going on?" And she admits that she what does she say? She's not ready to commit herself.
She knows she's not singing like her aunt.
Yeah.
She says she's not,
Yes.
and he says it's not your, and she says it's my voice. No, he goes, it's not your voice. It's this your aunt embodied the tragedy that you're singing and was able to convey that in her voice. And you're, I don't know what he says, you're in La La Land or something like that. He figures out that she's in love is what happened, and that she can't get to the darkness of the tragedy of the opera. And so, and he's another father figure, right?
Yes.
That invites her to, give up, take a break from this tragic stuff and go, go with your boyfriend and be in love, right? And I don't know what to make of that. He's like, instead of, no, you need to do this work. Yeah, he's colluding with the predator. But she takes it as, she gets very excited when he figures out that and sees her that she's in love. She's very excited about that, right?
Yes.
So he's in one sense a positive father figure, but in another sense he is colluding with this romanticized, idealized falling in love business, which we know is a setup for the predator, right?
Right. Maybe we could say, even at this early point, that there's the telos.
Yeah.
There's the unfolding that the unconscious is triggering to ultimately work through the trauma.
Yeah.
And at this early stage,
all of these characters, all of these elements are colluding towards this goal. That's a good point.
Right. And you have noted how tightly constructed this film is, how every scene almost is numinous.
Yes.
Once you've seen it, like any visionary film, and we want to talk about that at some point, the differences and what makes a film visionary, will have these clues that are planted almost unconsciously in the director or the screenwriter, that once you are onto it, you see how tightly packed it is and how brilliant it is.
I just want to add one thing. When you said Gregory was stalking her, I had looked up the etymology of all the names, and they all have relevance because Gregory means it's I think Latin for watchful. Anton means priceless. It comes from Anthony. It comes from Anthony. It means priceless. So those have relevance to the story, I think. And we know Paula means small, which automatically puts her in this archetypal position of being the weak feminine, the innocent feminine that has to be initiated. Right?
Yes. Oh, that's wonderful. It's wonderful to look at the names.
Yeah. So again, in that scene, everything is set, and then she goes off to to see Gregory in secret, which is an interesting image, right? That they're hiding their love affair from the very beginning.
And we see him pressure her.
Mm-hmm.
And then it turns out they've only known each other 2 weeks or something.
Mm-hmm.
He's pressuring her to marry her. And then she says, significantly, because of how the plot unfolds, she says, well, I need some time.
Mm.
This is too fast, or
yes,
it feels so modern, this story, even though it's taken from Victorian times. Give me some time, and I'm going to go off by myself to the lakes. And then we see her, and he says, okay. He lets her go. And she's then on a train, and she's in the car on the train with an old woman who, it turns out, all these synchronicities, right? Is reading a murder mystery.
Bessie.
And it turns out she happens to be a neighbor of the
in that building, where the aunt was killed.
Neighborhood and where the aunt was killed. And the neighbor, the woman on the train, is very chatty and is kind of a busybody, actually.
She is. She's a nosy. She's just an interesting character. She's nosy. She's a busybody. She starts off that scene with this delightful exclamation, because she's reading a story about a husband who murders his wives and stores them in the cellar, right?
Who knows? It could have been Fisher's Bird remake.
Yeah. Nothing's wasted, right? That's the archetypal backdrop of the story. This murderous husband.
Yes, nothing is wasted.
And I was just going to say, the other thing I saw, the last time I saw this, I'm going, if everything is meaningful, if you use that lens, then the scene where she gives her a digesting cookie, for a cookie to help with her digestion, which I didn't catch the first couple of times I saw the film, but I'm thinking, wow, that's brilliant. What does digest mean? Digest means to divide and carry. Literally.
Yeah, or to metabolize.
She's like, here, you're going to need this, right?
That's great.
You're going to need this.
I never picked that up, and how many times have I seen
it? Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. And so the busybody Bessie asks her, how it comes out that they live that
and there was a murder. She says, we live. And she knows, and Ingrid Bergson, I know of that area, and she could see that she's getting anxious.
Anxious. Yeah.
And then she brings up the murder.
Yes.
That there was a murder in that building. I heard about that. Yeah.
Yes. And so she's really rattled. Paula is rattled.
Yeah.
Walking off of that train.
Yeah.
And then there's that great scene. She's just walking off the train car, and in a Hitchcockian move, we see this hand come into the camera view.
Yeah.
And it turns out it's Gregory who's followed her there.
Yeah.
And she's so relieved.
Yeah.
Because she didn't want to be alone, because she got triggered. Her complex her trauma complex got triggered.
Absolutely. And he somehow knows this.
Yes.
Well, right? He is so attuned to her and her complexes somehow. I was reading Hillman, and this is real relevant. He says the combination of knowledge and power and the magical use of it for evil seems like the propensity of Senex consciousness. He's talking about Senex consciousness. Wow. And that that fits the Fisher's Bird fairy tale, right? So this idea that knowledge and power, and which brings up the sadistic, right? Sadism.
Right. Well, the
dark arrows. Yeah.
Let's refer back to that, because that's highly relevant for how this plot unfolds. Right?
Yes.
The whole
we will.
What does she know? Yes, and the levels of consciousness about what she knows and how she goes unconscious,
Right.
which is the image of the gaslight dimming.
Right.
Yeah. So could we say then, Dan, with your interest in the predator, that predator energy is always Senex energy?
Yeah, it seems like it. You know, as I'm reading Hillman, the Senex is about melancholy and brooding and darkness. And then, you know, as you started out, this is a film noir. This just the whole atmosphere of the film has this darkness to it. And on the negative side of the Senex is Saturn, and I think the predator too lies in there, because he's so astute at knowing of her, and then capitalizing on that and using that.
And there's a pair of opposites, isn't it, with her innocence?
Yes.
She's a kind of Puella.
Yeah.
Like you said, uninitiated.
Yeah.
And so there's the opposites.
And you know, and Jung, you know, from the Red Book on, put the young feminine and the old man together.
Salome
right?
and Elijah.
Yeah. But you know, they're together, and you know, and that could have its negative Senex component to it, right?
But I wonder if those two opposites are really what triggers the transcendent function. The power of those two.
Yeah. Yeah, let's keep that concept, the transcendent function, because that's what's guiding this whole thing, right? This movement into consciousness.
Yes. So in terms of the plot, then they do get married. He takes her. They have a honeymoon, and then there's this beautiful scene where he says, "I have this dream."
Yeah.
That he wants to go back to London.
Yeah.
And she, needing to please, being the uninitiate she is, and the character is so relevant clinically for working with our female clients in patriarchy. She says, "I want to give you this dream, and I happen to have a house in London."
Yeah, right.
And so they go back to the home, and it's
where the murder took place.
Where the murder occurred.
Yes.
The return of the trauma. And she's a bit wary, justifiably. We see her very kind of skittish. Right?
Oh yeah. And speaking of it, there's a scene when he enters the house first, and he says, come on in, Paula. Don't stand in the doorway. And she was standing in the doorway, and I'm thinking of thresholds of initiation, right?
Yes.
She on some level knows that she is moving into an initiatory experience with all its dangers, right?
And we know this is the realm of the trickster.
Yes.
Those liminal spaces.
Yeah.
And we're going to be hopefully getting to that.
Yes.
In terms of what the trickster in both sides of that split, positive and negative.
Yeah.
The doorway.
That space, transitional space that Winnicott uses for play and for initiation. Do you want to talk about the trickster now, or do you want to?
Yeah, sure. It's been named as Jung named it as the collective shadow. Other writers have named it as the archetype of individuation, the archetype of the self. So we've got some big guns here, operating some real numinous energy.
Yes,
that's being awakened here.
Yes,
in the whole plot. It uses humor. We don't see too much humor in this film. Not much at all.
It's another thing Hillman says about the Senex. There's no humor. There's no laughter here. This is serious stuff. But
the trickster upends our typical way of being. Etymologically, it means disrupting the ordinary. So something big is going to be upended and destabilized. And we'll see that big time in her psychology.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. You know, the other way is thinking about the Trickster, going back to Jung's essay on the Trickster, is it has a throwback to our animal nature.
Yes, mythologically, yes. That energy.
And that, I don't know if he said that or Raiden, he's quoting Raiden, that all of civilization could be summed up as a forgetting of the Trickster.
Yes.
Is that right? Because that's what she's forgotten, right?
Yeah.
Is, you know, the whole murder, this whole thing, backstory is now the film is a forgetting of it, and then having to go back and remember it.
And when you say animal nature, you also mean, and you've said this, the instinctual.
Yes.
Instinctual. And so we, our Western cultures don't want to admit that we're animal, and we have instincts that have to be fulfilled, or because, and of course Jung accommodated that in his theories, with the archetype being both the instinctual side and the spiritual side.
Yes.
So he didn't split them as Western culture splits them.
That's right.
So the rest of the film, once they're back in the house, is an unfolding of his manipulation, Gregory's manipulation of her, and her struggling with trying to remember, that you said, the process of remembering.
Right. And the isolating. So this whole composite of maneuverings and manipulations to separate her, to control her, to undermine her consciousness, undermine her ego, even her executive function.
Yes.
Is just diabolical.
Diabolical.
The way he does it.
Yes. And let's say here, to introduce the whole way, the term gaslighting, introduced in a big way in the culture last political election cycle.
Yes.
And people were talking about how we were being gaslighted as a country with the whole deception and the polarization of how news had become fake news in some quarters. So that gaslighting entered the vernacular in a big way a few years ago. And but we know in our field that that is a psychological maneuver in an individual level, but it happened at a national level, and I think we're still dealing with that. So,
but speaking of, so what does this time period would mean in relationship to the story? If we see ourselves as having to go through this Puella stage of unconsciousness, of innocence, of almost a naive relationship to the institutions that we had come to be enamored with, right? There's and Senex, again, Hillman says Senex is in institutions, law, rules, regulations are part of the Senex consciousness. And, so have we been innocently, in love with our, democratic institutions, and is somehow this world stage upheaval of the trickster coming in and turning all of that upside down? Is it serving some larger purpose?
That's wonderful, Dan. I would hope to hold on to some hope there in terms of
Yeah.
a more hopeful outcome. But yes, yeah.
It seems like we're like holding on to it, just trying to hold on to it these past few years of what does democracy mean? And I never thought it could slip away like that. We had been taken advantage of it.
Well, in terms of that, I think we could say that we have neglected as a country to face our traumatic past.
Yeah.
Racial.
Yes.
So that is our trauma that we have not faced. And now with organizations like Black Lives Matter, hopefully all of that trauma is more in our consciousness.
Yeah.
And hopefully.
And gender, the Me Too movement.
Gender issues.
The synchronicity of all that.
Right. Yeah. So
there are particular scenes in that, that gradual deterioration where she's being slowly driven insane that stand out for you. Do you remember?
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, and maybe it's good here to point out the scenes that where she kind of comes to.
Yes, yeah, I like that.
Because he loses it.
He loses it.
He gets angry at different points. Right from it's actually in the beginning with the scene where they're just entered the house. They cross the threshold.
Yes.
They're in the house. Things are dusty and dirty, and he says, we'll move out some of these old furniture.
Yeah.
So you won't be reminded of whatever happened here. He's playing dumb. And so he sits down at the piano and starts playing because he's an accompanist.
Yes.
The aunt's accompanist. And a letter falls out of a song that Paula picks up. And it's a letter, synchronistically, that he had written to the aunt before he murdered her. And she starts reading it. And he loses it.
He loses it, grabs it.
And she gets stunned by his rage.
Yeah.
And she and he covers it up and, just makes some excuses, right? But you watch Ingrid Bergman, she won the Academy Award for this.
She deserved it.
Yeah. You watch her consciousness kind of come to light, right?
Yeah.
He goes, you can actually kind of catch her stream of consciousness, like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
What was that rage about?
Yeah.
And so she kind of
like the trance, like she's in a trance, and then she's like knocked out of the trance for that moment.
Out of the trance, yeah. And I have thought that maybe if we stick with the subjective level and he's her negative animus,
right.
I wonder if we could see that as an animus attack on her, and her ego in that moment is strong enough to say, what is this?
Yeah.
To kind of step out of that possession by the negative animus.
What's so interesting as you're talking about this, you're absolutely right, because I'm thinking of my analysans and that type of animus explosion would put my analysan often in a state of, I did something wrong, just in tears, they collapse, right?
Yes.
But she did not collapse. It was the opposite. She was in a moment of what is going on here? And it's almost as if she could have held that. She would have become more suspicious, right? But she lost it. She lost it. And there's a couple of scenes like that where he explodes.
Yes. And she gets the ego strength that's there but buried underneath this need to please and
right.
And acts on it, but then he maneuvers her in ways that keep his power and control over her.
Yeah.
I was thinking too, Dan, that I think at least for women, I don't know if this is maybe true for men and the negative anima possessions, but women, we gaslight ourselves.
Yeah.
That's the implication of that. If we look at it subjectively, we gaslight ourselves every time we doubt our abilities and what we know.
Yeah.
So like the imposter syndrome.
Yes.
All of that self-doubt that my female clients talk about a lot.
Yes.
We're gaslighting ourselves.
Yeah.
We're undermining our own abilities, our own capacity to claim what we know.
To claim. That's a perfect word. Yeah. And the and so there's installed another way of looking at it. The predator is installed before she even meets Anton or Gregory, right? Mm-hmm. It's intrapsychically there.
Yes.
So he becomes a perfect projection for that, right?
Yes, and that is a good opening to say that what we've noted is that she didn't know her father. Mm-hmm. Her mother died, I think, at childbirth, so she was living with her aunt who's murdered when she's 12 or 14 or something like that.
Yeah.
So she doesn't have the images of or had the experience of her parents.
Yes.
So the predator is more easily insinuating itself because of those loss of a grounding in good parenting. So those are a lot of trauma.
And you said that in a particular way, and I'm not going to get it right, but you can fix it. That in the absence of the mediated archetype, to experience the archetype directly,
right?
We
experience
it as what? I forget how you put that.
Oh, when I was in training, actually another candidate had that. There was a line that really was great. She said that when the parents are absent, the archetypes babysit.
That's right. Isn't
that brilliant?
That's right.
So
and both poles of the archetype, right? Because they're experiencing the archetypal directly. They're experiencing both poles, the positive and the negative. And the positive, I think, becomes part of the idealization. Like she's enamored with his charisma, right?
Right.
And then the negative pole, too, is a direct.
Right. She's charmed by him. Right.
Yeah.
So both poles, right. Because there's this very important idea that the parents in good parenting humanize archetypal energy so that they can be more introjected in that humanized way, so that she can have the ego strength to claim what she knows and move on in her life and develop.
Right. And in the absence of that, in a therapeutic situation, the analyst becomes that mediator, right? The analyst carries that as part of the transference.
Right. Exactly. That's an important point.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent point. Right.
Oh, I wanted to throw in, so the etymology of Sergius is protector. Which conjures up Kalsched and the persecutor protector, the self-care system. Right?
Yes. Now let's say Sergius is the name
that was the previous name that he used with the ant, which is an interesting image, because it's kind of like what's underneath his name. Well, there's this underlying identity, right? That's probably another made up name, but even this underlying identity has this. So that Sergius's protector Bauer, his last name, means birdcage or inner room, which brings up this idea of containment.
Yes.
Which goes back to the idea, what is this trickster archetype bringing to her, right?
Right.
It's an interesting image, and Hillman talks about the Senex as providing this containment, because the Senex is about limits.
So again, it feels to me like a Telos is being enacted here.
Yeah.
On both poles, positive and negative.
Right.
And it's so interesting, the etymology of these names. I have to assume that these are not accidents, you know? I
mean,
the director may not, or the screenwriter may not have been completely aware, but something's operating in that process of choice.
Yeah.
That's maybe out of their awareness, but is meaningful.
Yeah. It's interesting, just the idea, we know how, fairy tales evolve and are passed down generation to generation, but these films too have their own evolution, and they go through many different people often, right? And they each bring something to the story.
Right. And hopefully reflective of some progressive understanding of human evolution.
Yeah, right. So we're at the point where so she I'm wondering at what point is he really, and this is the scene that really gets to me, when he realizes that she's wants to go out, right? He knows that, and so he tells her that he made plans to go to the theater, and she gets so excited, and she says something very interesting. She said, "You're so kind." She loves him. She's kissing him. "Oh, you're so wonderful. You're so kind to me." And of course, he just was setting her up,
playing with her.
And then after that, he goes to the where the picture is missing and says, "What did you do with this painting?" And that just sends her. Is this idea, Judith, that of this setup for the trauma? In other words, Kalsched uses this image of somebody that he had in therapy. It was actually a psychotherapist, and he uses the story where when she was a little girl, she went to they moved into a new house, and she was so excited. She wanted to celebrate the moment, and so she gave her mother a bunch of flowers that she picked. And the mother's reaction was she got upset with her. She scolded her, and she took her over to the next door neighbor to apologize for having cut her flowers, right? And that was traumatizing to the child. And my thinking around that is that what made it more traumatizing was the child was set up for a different response, because the child was seeking something else, right?
Yes.
And Paula's reaction to his generosity of taking her out was like, "Oh yeah, this is true. This is really the man I fell in love with.
Yes.
Not this other guy. This is the man." It's like, "Oh my God, thank you. You're saving the image that I have of you," right?
That fits the romanticized good guy.
Yes.
the actor.
And then after that, he tells her, and then she goes to find the painting. The other part of that scene is when they're walking up the stairs, and this is just brilliant to me. She is figuring out, okay, she just uses logic, which an insane person couldn't do, right? She's figuring out, okay, if these things are true and I am truly going crazy, she says to him, then then Gregory, you're going to have to be kind to me. Do you remember that? You're going to have to be kind to me.
Yes.
And he just stares straight ahead, no response, and is just cold, completely cold.
Yeah.
That scene really got to me.
Yes, because she's so human in that moment, but
Yes.
she's going to his better, so-called quote unquote better nature.
Yeah.
But I think you're bringing up a great point in terms of the blindsidedness setup. Like here, I'm going to take you to the theater, but I just noticed the picture on the wall that's missing again.
Yes.
You do this to me. You know,
Yes.
I'm the victim now. The predator is the victim.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to help you, but you're not who I thought you were.
Yeah.
That's all a setup. But so there's the trickster again. That surprise element.
Yeah.
Like that expecting the unexpected. The unexpected happens that the ego doesn't expect.
Yeah.
That disruption of what we think we know, but he's using it to dominate and control and maneuver her into thinking that she's going insane.
Yeah. There's a coldness, and Hillman talks about the coldness of the Senex. You know, the coldness, the distance, the separation, the separatio of the process. This just absolute coldness in a moment when she is desperate.
Yeah.
Desperate for connection, desperate.
Yeah. And most opposite of that coldness. She's alive, she's excited.
Yeah.
He's playing at the piano and she's dancing around the room.
Yeah.
We're going to the theater because
Yeah, she's singing. Yeah, you're right. She's just,
Yeah, and that's interesting because what I'm remembering too is either before that, there's the camera is such a character sometimes in this movie, not always like in some film, but there's a scene where he walks toward her and we see him come at her through her eyes, and he is acting, he's like so cold and evil. You can feel the evilness of him. No bedroom eyes here.
No. In fact, when you said eyes, there's a couple of scenes. One when he was, I think, looking at the gems, what do you call them?
The jewels.
The jewels.
Crown jewels.
Crown jewels. Thanks. And the way the camera and the lighting, his eyes appear black. His pupils are black, but there's this light that shines on his pupils. And if you've ever looked at there's an image of Bluebeard in a plate, an old plate of Bluebeard from the fairytale Bluebeard, which is another murderous husband theme, and his eyes are scary. His eyes are scary. And that's what it reminded me of in those scenes, the way they used the camera to capture his eyes in two scenes where he gets this far off
otherworldly
look. I think when she pulls down the drape from the painting, the portrait of the ant, he has that same look in his eye when he sees her.
And of course, that mirrors one of the last lines in one of the last scenes where he says to her, there was a fire in my brain or something. Fire in me.
A fire.
Those jewels.
Yeah. That's it's a good point. He's describing what the director was picturing, was portraying in the look of him. This fire.
That's an amazing scene, and where you're describing with the picture but before that, that scene at the tower where we know now, having seen the whole movie, he had misplaced. It's all about misplacing he's misplacing the objects and
Yeah.
trying to catch her and thinking that she has forgotten
Yeah.
where she has misplaced
Yeah.
them. So all that deception and manipulation to undermine her ability to know what she knows and to trust her own knowing.
Yes.
And that scene in the tower, he has misplaced her brooch.
Yes.
And they're at the Tower of London, and there's
Yeah.
a guy talking about the executions.
I love it.
And that's mirroring his diabolical executing that he's acting out with her.
Yeah. Which, and the beheading. The guys, then this is where they were beheaded. With the image of this dismemberment and this all of this gaslighting that he's doing is severing her thinking from her instincts, her head from her body, and because she doesn't trust anything, she doesn't trust her instincts until Joseph Cotton shows up.
Yes, let's talk about Joseph Cotton. And I think your use of dismemberment is right on. That is the word.
Which is, the image in the fairy tales.
Yes, that's
both
right.
Fairy tales, right?
Pitcher's bird. Yes, there's an actual dismemberment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that the dismemberment is a good image for what's going on psychologically for her, because this is just completely cutting up everything that she knows, everything that she thought she knew.
Right. And would that be? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, with a larger purpose at the end. The telos is having a larger purpose at the end, but the process of it is just
right. Would that be the mortificatio?
Yeah.
Alchemy?
Yeah.
Because there is one alchemical plate. I forget if it's in the Rosarium, maybe in the Splendor Solis, where there's actual a figure cutting up limbs.
Yes.
That is like a reminiscent of
the Splendor.
Animus. The Splendor Solis. Yeah. Oh, Dan got frozen on this. What happened to the audio here? We had our own dismemberment here. Can you hear me, Dan? Oh, you're back.
Judith, I lost you for a second.
Yeah, we lost you too. It was our own dismemberment here.
Oh my gosh. Isn't that something?
The parallel process going on with the technology in this moment.
And precisely that moment. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Yeah, let's finish the story from that perspective, and then we'll go back through it from the male perspective. Yeah. So to finish the plot, Joseph Cotton has been watchful and voyeuristic and interested because he was smitten by the aunt when he was a boy. He went to the opera of Romeo and Juliet. He went backstage. He meets the aunt. She gives him one of her gloves, and he carries it the rest of his life into manhood, and that's what he uses to gain her trust.
Yes.
When he comes to try and convince her that something nefarious is going on here, right?
Yes.
And so he was smitten by the Anima image of the aunt, and then re-smitten by the image of the niece when he sees her in the square, and he's with his nephew and niece, which is an interesting introduction to the character. And then his whole thinking through this film was, how do I get in relationship to her? How do I get to meet her? How do I get to, and he gets more bolder and bolder as the story progresses, right?
Yes.
Even being tricksterish, you pointed out, he's pretty tricksterish too, because he gets the lady across the street to pretend that he's her nephew.
Yes.
Right. And that they're going there to see how she's doing and stuff like that. But eventually he convinces her. And there's a scene that you point out when when he's asking her questions, he does it in such a way as to ask her questions. So Gregory goes out, and then the gaslight goes down, and it's almost like an analyst, right? That asking these questions, and then he finally says to her, so who's doing this? And he goes, don't you?
Don't you? Yes, it's brilliant, right? Because he's aligned with that part of herself that does know, that has resisted seeing more fully the nefarious predator here. So she does know, and so he, as a good analyst, I think that's great that he is like an analyst, and he gives it back to her so that she can claim that ability within herself. And because and he when they're there together, trying to piece this together, the gaslight goes down and then goes back on, and he says, "Is that what happened?" So she knows that he has the same experience. And she's not insane. He's witnessed the reality of Gregory's nefarious.
And she's so relieved. She's just how she responds in that scene. Relieved. She's so relieved. Yes. I think that's such a numinous experience, I think, from an analyst perspective, when the analyst experiences that, right? And it's, this light bulb goes off, and it's as if the analyst is seeing something that the analyst sense was there, but with all the gaslighting that goes on in our culture, didn't know. And then it's like, oh, you see it too, right? Yes, you see it too.
You've named it for me, and you get it. Yes. Yes. So, given that we have limited time, Dan, let's talk about the denoyment.
That's right. Yeah. So I'll preface the last scene from the perspective of the masculine. So if we go through the whole story again from the perspective of the masculine, you have two masculine elements. You have the one that gets in with hello. The Charles Boyer is in there without any resistance.
Just touching her.
Just touching her. Just touching her. And then you have this other masculine, the positive masculine figure, who's on the outside, that has to find a way in to this triadic or dyadic relationship that seems to be so sealed.
Yes.
Right. And he has got to, and he's relentless in trying to get in to that, and to rescue. Right. I think, one of the differences in experiences, you described how angry you got, seeing this movie again. Right.
Yes. But let's bring in, from what you just said, there's this concept that John Beebe is an analyst has talked about, tricking the trickster. Yes. So it's almost like this positive, because the negative animus can be seen as a trickster, but then we have to trick it by maybe the detective positive, tricking her into getting her to see that she really does know. And then there's this amazing last scene where the detective Bryan captures Gregory, ties him up, finally puts all the pieces together, and they tussle, they capture him, they tie him up, and she wants to confront him.
Yes.
Goes into the room herself. She says, I need to talk with my husband.
Yes.
And he's still caught by trying to
save her.
That she's on his side. And he says, release me, there's a knife in the desk, get the knife and cut me loose and we'll escape together.
Yeah.
And so she does this tricking where she says, okay, I'll find the knife. Is this a knife?
Yeah. I don't see a knife.
I don't see a knife because I'm insane. This isn't a knife here in my hand.
It's brilliant.
And so she vents all of her righteous, it's my own righteous feminist anger that relates to her righteous anger of confronting this predator and
that she claims. And so that's a beautiful scene where she claims her anger, her rage, her power,
knowledge and her power, right?
All in that one scene. But I think what's interesting from my perspective, remember, I'm coming at this film from, the hero, it gets constellated, right? This happens in analysis. The hero gets constellated, and the analyst has to be mindful of not undermining the autonomy and the healing powers that are within the analysan. And so when she says to Joseph Cotton, I want to be alone with my husband. And he says, well, I don't think that's a good idea. Yeah. And she insists.
Yes.
His letting go of that.
Yes.
Is very important, right? His letting go. Okay. And so she does her trickster thing, which is another way of her now embodying the trickster. She has incorporated, which is one of the digestibles, right? Yes. She has to incorporate the trickster into her personality.
Yes. And Dan, could we say then that the detective needed just what you said about the analyst being able to allow the analysan to claim their own power?
Yes.
Would that be related to the feminine let's say in a male analyst, or
Yes.
Would you want to name that as a feminine or his own wholeness, or allowing, because we know that analysts have taken advantage of specifically feminine,
absolutely,
female clients.
Well, I think that raises a point.
For the male analyst, to allow,
because the analyst holds both, right? In fact, I was, I'm reaching the end of analysis with a woman I've been with for many years, a young woman, so she's grown up a lot since then, and I realized all of the elements in this film have been within our analysis.
Oh my!
It's because the predator is either out there, or the predator could be me undermining in some way her autonomy. You know what I'm saying? That in some way, I'm rescuing her in the moment.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
Caught by that
and being caught by that, and having to realize that, but like Jung says, it flits about. The trickster flits about between the analyst and the analysan, and it's all been in there.
Wow.
This whole all the elements in this film. So to just a final thing. So this to me is about the masculine and the feminine trying to reach a relationship of rightness. In other words, in order for it to be in right relationship to each other, they have to go through this initiatory process with the predator, which, because you can't just if you jump into romance and you don't take these into consideration, these trickster, animalistic, these shadow, collective shadow elements, then you can doom the relationship, right? And so the end of the film is Joseph Cotton, saying, if I'd like to see you from time to time, and she said, "Oh, that would be great," and she touches his arm, right? And then just as Bessie comes out and goes, "Ooh." I love that. So it's like, okay, this is about Paula's individuation, but it's also about both the masculine and feminine having to go through this to come into right relationship, to have the conjunctio.
Yes,
that
yes,
you
and
talk
therein
about,
lies a
right?
wholeness. Yes,
Yeah.
outwardly and inwardly, could we
Yeah.
say? Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And I would say too that for women leaving in feminine psychology, leaving, getting transcending a bit the roles of the maiden, the mother, even the muse for a man, in the and getting right with their own power and knowledge and
Yes.
who they are.
And we were talking about the Senex of Gregory. Well, the puer of Bryan.
Yes.
Bryan's etymology is it means honorable and noble, which really fits, right? It fits the positive image of the masculine, or positive image of the father.
Yeah.
Which I think was is and then the last scene where Gregory is tied up. I told you that. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
In the other iterations of the film, there's this sleuthing that goes on of trying to trick, to figure out, and for the predator to self-disclose what he's doing.
Yeah.
Which is intellectually cute, but just the image of this rope tied around this trickster. I love it. Like, that's what we have to do with the trickster, is capture, rope him up, and because we're not going to get rid of him, and just know where he's at, right?
Keep him in our purview.
Like the Winnebago Indians, where I think the trickster god, they installed with the other gods to keep an eye on him. I love that.
Well, he'll have to escape at some point to, wreak havoc, but then
that's
make
right.
everything
Yeah.
right too.
Yeah.
Work it through. Well, this has been really enjoyable, Dan.
I love it.
Thank you.
I love it. Thank you so much. Till next time, we'll have another one on another film, or maybe even a director. So you guys can look forward to that.
Stay tuned.
Thanks, Judith. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This podcast is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license. Share it all you like, as long as you maintain the attribution to the speaker, but please do not change it or sell it. If you like this episode, tell your friends about us or leave us a review on iTunes. For more information about classes, training programs, videos, audio, this podcast, or to find a Jungian analyst near you, visit our website, www.jungchicago.org. Thank you to our 2020 donors who gave at the contributing member level and above: Barbara Annan, Usha and Ashok Bedi, Jackie Cabe Bryan, Eric Cooper and Judith Cooper, Kevin Davis, George J. Didier, Mary Dougherty, James Fidelibus, John Korolewski, Marty Manning, Diane Sherwood, Deborah P. Stutzman, Deborah Tobin, Alexander Wayne and Lynn Kopp, Gerald Weiner, Karen West and James Taylor, and Ellen Young. If you would like to join our generous community of supporters, just go to jungchicago.org/give.